All right, it's our last class for addictions. And I was hoping more people would show up either online or in person so that everybody could share their papers with one another. You could hear what each other did because you don't get to read each other's papers by submitting them to the assignment Dropbox. But I think it is interesting for you to hear what each other found out and discovered or came up with for these. So that is usually, I usually teach in person. So that's usually what we do. We share our papers, ask any questions about the semester or about any assignments, and see if you have any questions about addictions that maybe we didn't cover. We kind of do a wrap up with everything that hasn't been, that still needed to be done. So let's see. Now, as far as a timeline, tonight's the last class, papers were due. Um, I am going to be going away Saturday night on, so all my grades will be in Saturday afternoon. Uh, and I'm going to start reading at like 6 o'clock Saturday morning. So if you do have anything left to do, a discussion board, a paper, perhaps your addictions um, project, uh, it final final due date is midnight Friday. That gives you a day to complete everything. But yeah, so do your best. After midnight Friday or 6 a.m. Saturday, uh, I'm going to just have to hand grades in. And if something's not completed, um, I can't give you an incomplete or something like that just because they want grades in. So that is your extension, you know. Uh, hopefully, my goal is for everybody to be successful, for you to be able to get all the material and complete everything you need. I know, hey, life happens, but I've been pretty flexible this semester. So please, whatever you need to do, tomorrow night by midnight would be great. Okay. Any questions about the timeline or the semester or grades before we share papers? All right. Well, Casey, if you don't mind just sharing a little bit of your paper, you're the only one online, and then I'll turn the computer around. We got a couple of students here that can share a little bit. And this is not formal, just just some high points of things that interest you, basically.
Okay. Yeah. So I started out with talking about how I thought it was a strength that I have experience with loved ones suffering from addiction. So I considered that a strength because it gave me a more empathetic approach. But I also thought that it could be a weakness as well because you have to remain empathetic yet professional with clients suffering from addiction. So there's kind of that fine line there. So I did talk about that a little bit in the beginning. And then I said that as an opioid addictions counselor or specialist, I would offer a full assessment and a comprehensive diagnostic process while utilizing cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT. So that's mainly what I talked about with CBT. I chose that treatment process because I have personal experience with CBT, and also I just think it's a really great option for those struggling with addiction. Um, and I'm looking at my paper while I'm talking.
Yeah,
So
no problem. No problem.
let's see. So it can help. There's a lot of positive features of CBT, which I'm sure a lot of us know, but it can help provide hope to individuals about their condition, develop self-esteem, self-worth, help them to relax and develop a more rational thought process. And reduce stress and anxiety as well. And let's see what else I wrote. I said I would provide both individual and group therapy, especially because I don't think I would have chosen group therapy if I also took with this course for the summer semester, I took the group counseling and group work course, and I found that really enlightening. So I think I would offer, group therapy as well, or because it's very advantageous. And I found some information about that, like some information that it's a really good natural ally for addiction treatment and continuing with abstinence. So there's that. What else? And I said I would incorporate comorbid diagnoses, of course, with my clients, as I believe it's an integral part of the process.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Let's see. And then I said that my personal reaction to the course was that it was at times overwhelming in regards to content and homework, but I certainly learned a lot. And I had a previous interest in addictions counseling because it was so near and dear to my heart. So that helped to keep my interest peaked throughout the entirety of the semester. And, I got to learn how to, what it was to create my own basic treatment model and what it would look like for me as a future counselor. And it gave me a lot of food for thought.
Great. So CBT, it's fine you did your paper on that. I do always include CBT in addiction treatment, but I normally don't only use CBT.
That's what I was playing with the idea of using I think is it REBT?
Well, I mean, they're the same thing.
I know that they're very similar.
Yeah. So yeah, it doesn't matter. REBT, CBT, one's Ellis. But what I'm saying is I wouldn't only use a cognitive therapist.
Right.
Because irrational thinking is only a small part of addiction.
That's very true. Yeah.
So it does address that. And I use it in all addiction treatment. But I would, later, not for your paper or anything. It's fine as it is. Just think about like group, group would be is a good component.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just adding things like the group component, REBT, CBT, maybe something else that deals with comorbid symptomology.
Sure.
People who love CBT think, oh, well, that would work for all the comorbid things too. There's a reason these other theories are out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
The reason everybody says, oh, CBT or REBT works is because in the short term, they're very measurable. So
right.
it's easy to do a study on CBT, and they usually get good results. But when they look at long-term relapse and things like that, you might want to incorporate some other theories as well.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for the feedback. I appreciate that.
So CBT can be the answer to everything according to journal articles. Yeah. All right. Sounds good though. Thanks. I'm going to move over here. I'm going to let Pat go. Look at that. Okay.
Hi.
I did mine more geared. So starting with part one, I talked about my experiences and how I've a few family members who have gone through the addictions process. One for alcohol, the other one for a mixed variety. But neither of them, although they heavily affected my mom's side of the family, nothing really came of it for me. I was able to see it like with my grandma and that sort of stress, but as for the rest of my family, not really. Particularly for me, I didn't really get to experience much of that. So although I see where you're coming from, where I feel the empathy and I think it's a strength that there is addiction scene inside my family. I haven't really experienced it, so I can't relate to that level. And so like I find it hard to like say like, oh, I know how you're feeling. I really don't. And it makes it difficult for that, which I find to be one of my greatest weaknesses, especially because my inexperience with it. Um, for my treatment plan, I talked about how I play a supplementary role as a school counselor, because in school counseling you really don't get to have the extensive sessions or the continuous like treatment process, but by being able to talk about addiction and how it relates to the whole support staff between teachers, principals, school counselors, as well as the nurse and outside professionals. I'm able to talk about that and like talk about the relationships with that and be able to talk about it in the family unit rather than the individual, which is something that I take pride in. I'm able to look at things in the holistic aspect, which is why I chose like Adlerian and more like a person-centered, client-centered approach. Uh, so I really like that part of making the plan, but seeing as my role is not directly working with the addiction, I found to be really difficult. But yeah, I feel the same way about the family situation.
Yeah, so school is different because you're not gonna have like an addictions treatment
No.
program in a school. But you do, if you have the opportunity, get the student assistant program training, the SAC team,
Yes.
because they work with outside agencies. So
Mhm.
let's say you find out a student does have an addiction. You refer them to the SAC team, and then you work with an outside agency on both ends. You would work in the school to support the student. They would work on treating the addiction with the student, but you'd work together,
Yeah.
you know? I think that's how most schools kind of deal with it, but you're right about all of the different players in the
Yeah.
school as well. So, yeah, good. I think it's interesting hearing a school counseling perspective.
Yeah.
And Adler, hey, coming up with something with Adler, kudos for you. All right, Isabel.
Okay, so I also had a kind of similar reaction in part one that you guys mentioned, in which I talked about personal experiences with family members and loved ones and peers. I know that have struggled with various kinds of addiction, be it alcohol, nicotine, cannabis, opioids, whatever. And then also, I didn't really put this in here as much, but I'm not an addictions counselor, like that's not where I'm at in my field, but people that I have like worked with have struggled with addictions also. So I've experienced some of that a little bit firsthand, whether they're affected or people they know are affected, or how that's affected their lives. So I said that was I was also aware of my own kind of relation to this, and how I feel like sometimes I don't have like addictive qualities to my personality, but sometimes like getting comfortable in rituals and stuff like that, and my anxiety can sometimes be impacted by that. So I put that as like something to be aware of as a counselor, and like one way to work on that is to like pursue my own counseling. So I had that in my part one. And then so for my part two, I chose REBT, so very similar to you. I chose like a cognitive model because I liked the short term aspect of it that dealt with the fear and anxiety part, especially that often happens with the addiction process, the irrational thoughts and behaviors, but also the overall anxiety and fear that originally drives the addiction, because they're often self-medicating or using it to calm some kind of anxiety. And then I also put as a like shortcoming of that, or like negative aspect of that potentially, was the fact that it may not always be culturally competent or like considerate of people's situations depending on backgrounds. So because it is very structured, modeled. So as a way of like mediating that, I incorporated for a more long-term part person-centered or like Adlerian theory. So to try and make that less of more of an integrated, individualized process, because the addiction process itself does have a lot of, I put the REBT model because I felt like the ABCDE model directly kind of addressed the dynamics with addiction and some of the struggles and comorbidities, but also the using it in conjunction with another approach, I thought was also like an adjustment to be made. And then for like opioid addiction in particular, I put both individual and group counseling, and I was said depending on like severity, would depend on how long the treatment would last, or the level of which it would be like enhanced outpatient, or if it would be inpatient, like if they were to go to, you know, addictions facility in particular, or if it were to be like, you know, outpatient. And then I also put, like, I was very non-committal in like whether I would say like medicated treatment, non-medicated treatment, because I very much feel like addictions is a very case by case thing, and how people's bodies react and how long they've been using and the duration of frequency and what that medically looks like to just stopping versus continuing a medical like replacement kind of. So I kind of went back and forth with that as my treatment model, but I said for like 90 days at minimum this, and then continued counseling after sobriety or recovery. Yeah, and then for the class, I found it very interesting to like actually learn about the actual, you know, like physiological and neurological addiction process, and then also the actual counseling techniques and what that looks like specifically in addictions counseling. I found that very interesting and helpful, even though I flounder at keeping up with assignments at times, which is my own personal thing, but also overall, I really liked the class. So, yeah.
All right. Well, that was short and sweet. We got 3 people, but all right. So I'm glad you all showed up, but anything else I can help you with? Anything you need answered? Any kind of thing we didn't cover? I'm open to discussing anything. Hey, we've got plenty of time.
Could you go more into the non-substance addictions? We talked about it a little bit last week, so I'd just like to know more about those.
Yeah, so almost all non-substance addictions, the chemical is brain chemicals, you know, and something occurs to trigger the brain to produce those chemicals. It could be anything, you know. It could be like a runner's high, you know. I used to run a lot. I only experienced that one time, but I only ran like one marathon. But I felt so happy and positive at the end of the marathon, like the last 5 miles. I can see why people would do it again, you know. And you know, basically my body felt like it was in survival mode. Like something must really be chasing Grafton for him to be running this far. He's never run this far before. So, you know, there's so many different ways to trigger the production of various brain chemicals. There are certain chemicals like oxytocin that only certain things trigger, you know. But it's not just sex. It could be like they've done studies of simply holding hands or hugging. You know, it doesn't have to be total intercourse. It could just be a physical connection, like would happen with a child and a mom, you know, something like that. Because it's not only a love chemical, it's a bonding chemical. So they found it's produced with mothers and children just as much as it is with partners. But if you can think of like a myriad of ways to trigger the production of brain chemicals, you know, that's it.
Because I was thinking about it, because me and my friends were talking about hobbies last night and which hobbies are more expensive and things, and then we got on the topic of I play Magic the Gathering. It's like Pokemon but different. And so in order to get cards, you buy packs and you open them, and it's a random lottery of X amount of cards.
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking about that and talking about the addiction that has with it. So when that follows under the
So
gambling.
it's almost like gambling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the price of the hobby, because one card could be 5 cents, another one could be $200. And if you buy a $5 pack, you have a chance of getting that $200 card, or 10 cards all at 10 cents.
Yeah.
We were talking about that in
And then people sell just the good cards
yeah,
for lots of money.
or they grade them, and then like you have the Griffey Jr. rookie baseball card, which is thousands upon thousands of dollars. Ken Griffith Jr., is that a baseball player?
I don't know.
But he's like one of the most popular and most expensive baseball cards.
Huh.
So it's just one of those things, right?
Like I know Babe Ruth.
Yeah.
That's an expensive card.
Yeah.
That goes way back. Yeah, so I mean that's kind of like gambling triggering those brain chemicals, or video games or social media or something like that. There are healthy ways to trigger those brain chemicals. But they can also turn unhealthy. Like think about like a workaholic. There's a reason why they call it workaholic, you know. People get payoffs from doing good work, and they get a little bump of those brain chemicals when they get a promotion or maybe a big sale or an A or whatever it is, and that reinforces that. Yeah. So what else? Anything else?
I have a random question.
Yeah.
Since I am interested in specializing in eating disorders, is food considered an addiction? Do you know? Or is that not really black and white?
So certain foods can't be.
Okay,
So the example of sugar.
right,
Sugar can be, caffeine can be.
right.
All of those things are edible, you know. But general food, it has more to do with the individual than the food itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So they're receiving a combination of either comfort or control
Right.
through either eating, not eating, binging, whatever it might be.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would say if the food has a specific chemical makeup, yes, but that probably doesn't have to do with anorexia or bulimia.
Right.
That's more internal.
Got it.
Would the need for counting calories be more on the side of like OCD versus addiction? Because that's more of a compulsive disorder versus being, I mean, actually.
Yeah, so I mean, technically an eating disorder is not considered an addiction, although I just notice a lot of similarities,
Okay.
you know. So a lot of times, like I would say it's a combination of addictive tendencies being rewarded for certain things like control and losing weight, minor forms of body dysmorphia, probably due to our media. But at the heart of it all is really about self-acceptance and believing that every person, including ourselves, deserves to be accepted unconditionally for who we are, rather than meeting somebody else's conditions and changing who we are to meet those conditions. So the result of that, learning to meet other people's conditions, is thinking, am I good enough? Am I good enough for what? Ultimately, am I good enough to be loved? Well, I'm good enough to be loved if I meet these societal or individual conditions placed upon me, but ultimately it should be, I don't have to be good enough. I deserve to be loved for who I am.
Mhm.
But somewhere in our background, we get the message, you need to be a certain way in order to be loved and accepted. All right. Hey, thanks for coming to class.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you later.
All right. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.